Have you ever wondered about who goes to university and why? Or what makes some people protest and march on the streets and others not? Why are poor people more affected by the coronavirus than rich people, even though the virus does not care about how much money you have? Why do some people like classical music, others hip hop, and some people like both? Why do you raise your hand in school but not at the dinner table? These are all questions related to society, and sociology is the scientific study of society and human behavior. It is about the big stuff like nations, countries, cultures, politics, or whole civilizations. But then it's also about the small stuff like single interactions that you have with friends, with family, or with loved ones. And how do all of these things affect whether you raise your hand or not? Society is essentially just a group of people who share a culture and a territory. And we are all part of society. Society is everywhere. And I really mean everywhere. Even when you're sitting in your room and when you listen to music or when you watch this video here right now, society is in the house that you are in the neighborhood that you're living in the family that you belong to, the music taste that you think that you acquired, all the ideas that you have about what to study. It's in the posters that hang in your wall, and it's in the TikTok moves that you try to perfect. All these things are products of society. And sociology is really broad. It is very broad, and it tries to understand the social world in different ways. What we are all trying to do is to look for patterns, for recurring events, and try to understand them in all sorts of places. For example, I do serious research about the interaction patterns of football players in the English Premier League. Others study who is dating whom. Others look at who commits crime, or why do people litter more in neighborhoods where there's a lot of rubbish on the floor. Or why do people move from one country to another, and why is it that inequality seems to be getting bigger and not smaller? What we do as sociologists is we try to understand society, and we do that by seeing the general in the particular. We try to understand social behavior by placing it in its wider social context. For example, a sociologist looks not only just at the music that you like or the courses that you're interested in to study, but the sociologist puts that in relation to the social class background, your race, your gender, or age that you have. A sociologist might not necessarily be interested in a particular choice that you make. For example, whether or not to have kids now. But rather a sociologist looks at why is it that people tend to have kids later in their lives than just a couple of decades or generations ago. And why is it that the average family size seems to decrease? The thing that we as sociologists mostly care about are big patterns and how these patterns affect our lives and what we do with our lives, and then also how individuals reproduce these patterns by doing what they do. But we also try to see the strange in the familiar, and that's easier said than done. It is about looking at things from a different angle, flipping things around, and by doing that you see things in a fresh light, almost as if you would see it for the first time. A bit like if it would come from another planet. And when I asked you about why you raise your hand in school but not at the dinner table, it's about that. The thing about society is that we are all part of it, even as researchers. So we need to force ourselves to look at the things that look normal to us. The stuff that we don't see anymore because we take it for granted, like having an internet connection, having the freedom to vote or say our opinion. Or why do I get a coffee when I go to a cafe and give somebody money, which is a piece of paper or plastic with no intrinsic value at all? Common sense is a good starting point for these things, knowing that you shouldn't poke your nose in a job interview, or that you should say hello when you meet somebody for the first time, or that you don't show up late for class. But the sociologist goes beyond that and asks, why do we all seem to know these things? And how did we agree on them? Sociology is also about seeing the things that stick out, the stuff that is different and somehow doesn't make sense with our understanding of the social world. For example, in sports, why is it that India hardly ever wins any medals at the Olympics? In fact, India won fewer medals at the Olympic Games than Ireland, even though it has 200 times the population of Ireland. Or why is it that there are so few Islamic terrorists with degrees in Islamic studies, but so many of them with degrees in engineering? And why is it that the books that get stolen most from the libraries are the books on theology? I'm not making this up. Common sense gets us through the world, but sociology tries to understand the world. And common sense has been pretty different not too long ago and changes more quickly than you think as well. It was common sense that slavery is right, or that women could not vote, that gays could not marry, or that smoking indoors is fine. These things were common sense in the same way as their opposite is now taken for granted. We are all part of society, and sociology studies that.